Bartholomew de las Casas was down there in Central America, and he was a priest that saw these murders, and he said, and he begged the Pope, please reverse this policy. It's just giving them the right to kill. And I'm watching 100,000 people murdered in cold blood. And people burned at the stakes by the thousands, like the women's burned at the stake by the thousands in Europe by this Spanish and this Church Inquisition. Fortunately, they reversed that from 1532 and then said that before any imperial nation could colonize or seize their land, that they in fact had to do a legal basis with the indigenous peoples and no longer considered them animals of the woods, and that they were intelligent and had the right to negotiate either by a land surrender and or by a peaceful land surrender or the equivalent to buying the land. And that really is the basis of the 1763 Royal Proclamation. So we drew the line in the sand. We held the place for 78 days. Again, there's so much to deal with over there. There was a standoff. We were involved in a number of shootouts with each other. But I had told the operations commanders of that Operation Wallaby up at Gustafson Lake that if you come in here, that if anybody gets killed in Gustafson Lake, that there will be a nationwide call for the war societies all across the countries to go to war with Canada. And we, in fact, will not stop until we win complete independence and entitlement is reaffirmed in our right to self-determining nations of unsurrendered Indian lands. The state fired thousands and thousands of rounds, but they were told, if there's a shootout, don't you kill nobody. So most of those rounds were shot above the head. One woman by the name of Susan Bronson was shot in the arm, but that's because apparently she was running with something in her hand and they saw it as a threat because it was too close, so they hit her. But the fact is that they also understood that this thing could have got really out of control because there was a solidarity. There was a solidarity occupation over at Stony Point, and they killed Dudley George. When that happened, they knew we were in formation. We were ready to go. When I heard that they had actually shot Sullivan Bronson, I thought she was dead. I put out the word, if she is dead, it's an all-out war. It's an all-out war. It's an all-out war. It's an all-out war. Going forward. Going forward. 19th and today, on March the 17th, March the 17th of this year, I've been actively involved in trying to expose 9/11 situation as an inside job because of this bogus war on terror that gives them unbridled right to go and kill with impunity against so-called terrorists. Terrorists. Now listen to this. Prior to that, there was unbridled attacks against the communists. Prior to that, there was unbridled attacks against the barbarian savages of North America. Anytime we can be played out by the powers that be because of labelings for fear of being called a conspiratorial kook or an anti-Semitic. They're calling us anti-Semitic while they're killing the Semite peoples by the hundreds of thousands of Palestinians and making them refugees in their own land. We can't be played out of focus. We can't be played out of focus for fear of not being seen as politically correct. Look at the realities. Now let's look at the realities of struggle. I'm going to ask somebody to come up here and do me a favor and read this page here for me. I'll hold it.
Medieval torture is not a partisan issue. Medieval torture is an American issue. After being waterboarded 183 times in 1 month, Kaianereh'ko Mohammed subsequently confessed to 9/11, the assassinations of both Kennedys, Jack the Ripper's murder, the blowing of Hindenburg, blowing up of Challenger, blowing up of Columbia, disguising himself as an iceberg to destroy the Titanic, the crucifixion of Christ, and the extinction of the dinosaurs. This is not a joke. Torture has long since been known as, from the times of the Catholic Inquisition, the Spanish Inquisition, the Bolshevik Revolution, as is about getting the confession, not the truth. One has to wonder just how many sick pieces of work in this government are getting immense pleasure from seeing these photos and reading these reports, some of which are too disgusting for me to mention. Truly civilized and moralized Americans would have refused to order this or participate in this. And why? Because, number one, they use torture by the U.S. for all intents and purposes, pulls the U.S. out of any and all human rights treaties to which the U.S. has ever been a signatory, including the Geneva Accords. The use of torture by the U.S. is completely unethical to every human or American moral value expressed by the Constitution and Bill of Rights. 3. The use of torture by the U.S. has made the U.S. into laughingstock to the civilized world for its brazen hypocrisy. The global message is now crystal clear. The civilized world understands that any values or leadership talks about wanting to export like democracy, human rights, and human dignity are the same values of the U.S. actually holds in the most despicable contempt. The use of torture by the U.S. against foreign nationals and military gives other countries cartel branch to torture U.S. foreign nationals and U.S. military personnel. Anyone who has family members or friends in the U.S. military community, that last one should push him up your spine, excuse me. The problem with the U.S. government having, for all intents and purposes, walked away from the observing of the Geneva Conventions and the current government's refusal to hold war criminals, profiteers like Richard Bruce Cheney, George Walker Bush, and Donald Rumsfeld accountable for anything they have done are multifold, and President Obama's cowardice speaks for itself. First, no U.S. government official can ever again speak with a straight face about human rights, human dignity, and freedom until the world's most reviled war criminals are given a fair trial. That would be obscene hypocrisy. And secondly, by institutionalizing medieval-style torture, any American man, woman, or child, either civilian or military, who gets captured or arrested by any foreign government can expect no better treatment than what is meted out at Abu Ghraib or Guantanamo by Americans. Chew on that for a while. In spite of all this, documented truth and empirical evidence can no longer be censored by American propaganda medias like the sleazy Fox News. Richard Bruce Cheney and George Walker Bush use secrecy, fear, deception, intimidation, projectionism, and lies to galvanize public opinion and deceive the U.S. into the support of for their unwanted, unnecessary Nazi-style invasion of Iraq, and they tortured people to get false confessions as an excuse for it. 1. Iraq never had anything to do with 9/11. 2. Iraq had no weapons of mass destruction. 3. Iraq had no nuclear weapons. 4. Iraq had no connection to Al-Qaeda. 5. Iraq did not purchase any enriched uranium for Niger. 6. The Center for Public Integrity documented over 935 lies from Cheney, Bush, Rumsfeld, and Rice during the Bush tenure, and that was only 6 months worth of compiled lies.
Thank you very much. But here's what happened on March the 17th. On March the 17th, I had been reading prior to then, a call out by the Lawyers Against War to ban George Bush from coming into this country. He was going to speak at the TELUS Convention Center in Calgary, Alberta. And there was going to be 1,500 people at a luncheon paying $400 a plate to hear him speak, with him getting a $200 honorarium. I mean, $200,000 honorarium. I, at that point, concurred with Gail Davison and the Lawyers Against War and said that this guy should, according to Canadian law, the Immigration and Refugee Act, he should not be a credibly accused war criminal, is not allowed in this country. They used that same law to keep George Galloway out of this country when he was coming in to speak about the supplies and the money that he brought to all those people who have been bombed by U.S.-sponsored and Canadian-produced white phosphorus bombs. 2,000 Palestinians just recently murdered in cold blood by the partners of the United States government, the Israeli government, backed with Canadian and U.S. military weapons and chemical weapons, and as well as Canada's air machines, bombers.